Okay, are you guys ready? So, welcome to part 2 of Guest Speaker Week. This is Tristan, and he is here largely for my gender class people, and he's going to tell us about what it means to be trans. And as I did warn in my at the beginning of the first lecture, just in case you weren't here for that, as always, this is your opportunity to ask embarrassing questions. I've never yet seen Tristan weirded out. So normally I would not advise you to ask questions of a trans person you meet in the street, but this is not that situation. This is your chance. Do you have anything you want to say before we start? Okay. Well then I'm going to turn you all over to Tristan. Make sure on your way out you sign the sheets, but that's not an immediate emergency. And have fun.
Hi, I'm Tristan.
Hi.
And I am a trans man. What this means is that when I was born into a female body. Now, some trans people take offense to like the phrasing of "I was born in the wrong body," because they say, "No, this is my body. I was just, came with some assembly required." And I'm like, well, you know what? If you're going to explain it to just somebody on the street, or especially children who ask questions, keep it simple. Just like, okay, I was born in the wrong body. Okay, that makes sense. If you want to put more thought into it and be more philosophical about it, well, feel free. But like I said, I just don't take offense to the idea of the wrong body. Some people figure out very quickly that they're trans. Very young children say, "No, I'm a boy," or "I'm a girl." And some people don't realize it until they're in their 60s, because when you're born in that way, you're raised in that way, it's hard to realize that it's, something's not right. Even if you're aware something's not right, it's hard to pin down. It's like, being raised with a certain custom in your family, and then suddenly you're confronted with the idea that, hey, not all families do this. It just never occurred to you. So for me, I found that it finally clicked for me when I was 14. And I'll explain what it kind of feels like in a bit. But it finally clicked when I was 14. But at the time, my mother had been diagnosed with leukemia, and she was a very, very devout Catholic woman. So I didn't want to put that pressure on her while she was suffering, because I knew that it would just devastate her. So I kept my mouth shut, and when I was 15 and it became very clear that she wasn't going to make it, I decided, again, that I was not going to tell her, that I wanted her to be able to pass on thinking, my kids are in safe hands with their father, everything's going to be okay. So I did allow her to pass without telling her. And part of me does grieve that she didn't get to know the real me, but I don't regret my actions, because I feel like that was a mercy to let her pass without that worry. And then after that, my father, who loved my mother deeply, I knew he needed time to grieve. So I decided that I would, again, keep my mouth shut and not come out of the closet until I was 21. I picked 21 because I would have been an adult, and it would have been 7 years to the day, to the day, but 7 years since I realized. So that way, you can't really claim that it was just a phase, or at least not really with much credibility. Goodness knows people tried. And also, I couldn't be packed off to the funny farm. So I waited, and that was a very, very rough 7 years. Because when you're confronted with the knowledge something is desperately wrong with your self-image, with your place in the world, and every time you look in the mirror and you see something else, that's a very, and then with my mother having just passed, it was a very rough few years, but I stuck to my guns, and eventually when I did tell my father, my father's a very Southern conservative man, but a good man. And so when I told him, he just was kind of quiet for a while. And he said, "Well, I guess I kind of knew all along." And I'm like, "Dad, I've been in the closet for 7 fucking years. You couldn't have knocked on the door." But he was like, "Yeah, I don't like it, I don't understand it, but I love you. What do you need from me? And it's like, well, that's all you can ask for, the parents. He's just, and he actually paid for my top surgery himself, which was above and beyond. But what it feels like to be trans is that it's, in the beginning, before you really realize what it is, it's just something's wrong. When you're just not comfortable in your body. Even, all kids, especially going through puberty, you're not really comfortable, things are changing, and stuff. But for me, it was even before that. Like, I remember, and just mentally, I was never really a tomboy. And some trans men look back and be like, oh man, I was such a tomboy. I really wasn't. I liked playing with stuffed animals, and my friends were mostly girls. They'd want to be princesses. Well, I'm cool with that, but I want to be a prince instead. No matter what we played, I was always a male character, and I insisted on being a male character. And then, of course, growing up a little bit, and the girls started becoming more like young women, and I realized this isn't me. And when I looked at myself in the body, my body in the mirror, I didn't see a woman's body or a girl's body. I saw deformities. And I was damn cute, if I can say so myself. I was built like a fairy princess. I was 105 pounds. I was tiny and I was adorable. But I didn't see that in the mirror. I saw a thing. And when I thought of myself in my mind, it was always male. But it still didn't click. I'm a pretty clueless person anyway. But I'm kind of an absent-minded professor sort of person. So finally, when it clicked when I was 14, it was like, everything makes sense now. Because I realized that when I look at myself in the mirror, when I'm seeing my face, it's not my face. I'm wearing a costume, like a full body, like kind of, like the mascot suit costume. And when people talk to me, they're not seeing me, they're seeing the costume. And even if I'm expressing myself, hey, I'm actually inside here, this is actually who I am, they're like, that's not who you are, I can see who you are. Just look in the mirror, this is who you are. Well, so anyway, I came out when I was 21, and the process of going through a transition, some people choose to go through a medical transition, some don't. Completely depends on the individual. Personally, I did decide to go through the transition. So first thing you have to do is you have to go to a licensed therapist, and they have to say, yes, you are trans. And then you have to live for 1 year as your preferred gender, and then you can get hormones. You have to get a letter from the therapist to get hormones, and then you have to be on the hormones for 1 year, and then you can start getting surgeries. And the surgeries themselves, I can't remember how much my top surgery cost. I think it was probably like 10 grand or something like that. Anyway, it was pretty expensive. But bottom surgery starts at about 40 grand. So this isn't something you can just like walk into a hospital and say, all right, yeah, and then walk in one gender, walk out the next. And so many times in media, that's kind of what it's portrayed as. It's quick switch. It's not. This is a process that takes years and years. I've had my name legally changed, my gender legally changed. The funny thing about getting your gender legally changed is that it depends on the state. I was in Alabama at the time, which, by the way, is hell. And in Alabama, it states that you have to have gender reassigning surgery, or like any surgery that irrevocably changes your gender in some way. Of course, lawmakers don't bother to do any research, so technically I could have had a nose job to look more masculine, and that would have counted. Georgia is more lenient, you just have to be on hormones, I believe. But there's such little medical care for trans people because it is enormously regulated, especially to get hormones, because a lot of bodybuilders try to get testosterone for illegal purposes, and it's a controlled substance, one class below heroin. So if I'm caught with testosterone without a prescription, I could go to jail. And so a lot of doctors won't prescribe it. In Alabama at the time, now there's been a bit more, I had to drive an hour and a half to see a therapist and a doctor who would willingly prescribe testosterone. And then also finding just a general practitioner who will treat trans people. And even going to a gynecologist because I haven't had bottom surgery. Then you're sitting there in the waiting room surrounded by women who are looking at you like, luckily I'm small enough and androgynous enough that people just assume I'm a lesbian if I'm in there, which is, as long as I don't get, chased by the police, I'm okay with that. And then also doctors, you have to find a doctor willing to treat a trans person who's in your network. That's another thing. Like lately, some insurance companies will make a big PR statement about, oh yes, we're now treating trans people and we're covering their surgeries. Oh, but all of their doctors aren't in network. So it's like, well, so getting care as a trans person is very hard, and also you face a great deal of stigma going to the doctor. I had to have an emergency appendectomy, and when I went to the doctor, they did they did an ultrasound to make sure I wasn't pregnant, and they're still asking all these questions like, well, okay, so you are a girl. I was like, well, no, but I do have my uterus still, and then they're looking for, like, are you sure you have, and just like, the lack of respect you get from even the medical community is astonishing. Anything possibly wrong with you, they say, well, it could be the hormones. Like, no, I know what the hormones have been doing. I've been on them for, what's it now, 6 years, almost 7 years now. This is not a symptom of it. And, but being, a big deal with being trans is there's an enormous amount of body dysphoria. Just like, being anorexic, anorexic women, they look in the mirror and they see fat where there isn't any. Even to this day, I look in the mirror and I see deformities where there aren't. And I really struggle with that. I told my boyfriend once that, when I look in the mirror, I see a potato. I'm a pretty slim guy, but I still see, like, it's just lumping and deformed. So then he started calling me Potato as like a pet name, and it made me feel better. So he's good for something, I guess. But so I did have my chest surgery when I was, how old was I, 22? Yeah, because I had been living as a man for roughly a year before I came out, before I started going to the doctor. She was very much just like, all right, yeah, you're trans, you're doing your thing, here's a letter, go get more ones. So that was very lovely. But so I had a double mastectomy, which means both breasts were removed. Because I was on hormones for a year, I had lost all the fat in that area of my body. Of course, fat redistributes. So now it was just breast tissue left. So I'd gone from a large B cup to like a small A cup. And so I had those removed, and one breast, not yet, bit gory details, they had cut somehow wrong, so like it started swelling with blood like a water balloon. And yeah, I called my dad and I'm like, look, I need to go back to the doctor, this is clearly thing. He's like, oh, you have an appointment in like, a week, don't worry about it, and I was like, oh fuck. So I finally it ruptured like a water balloon, just like outside the stitches, and I woke up one morning just completely drenched in blood. Like it was like, I mean, a good like that much of blood. And this is how you can tell I'm a guy, because I wake up drenched in blood and my first thought is, that's hilarious, get the camera. Take pictures. So then I had, thankfully my doctor, who is here in Atlanta, he's actually in Sandy Springs, did a second surgery completely for free. And so there are a lot of doctors here, especially in Atlanta, who really take care of trans people, because it's so hard to find good care really anywhere else except in large cities. I did escape to Atlanta, by the way, about 4 years ago. So, so I'm actually, Kaiser Permanente is an insurance company that does cover full trans services. So hopefully I will be getting bottom surgery very soon, I hope. I'm trying to think where to go.
Can you talk about what it felt like when you started the hormones?
When I started, oh yes, so hormones are a very fun subject because puberty didn't suck enough the first time around, so I thought I'd give it a second go. Being on testosterone really does change everything compared to being on estrogen. It's like, I used to be very cold-natured. I was always freezing. I always had to have a jacket everywhere I went. Now I'm always burning up, and I have to wear light clothing. I gained about 20 pounds of muscle in the first couple months, simply because it just changes your chemistry. And one negative thing about that, though, is that you are at a higher risk for certain cancers, breast cancer, your ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, all that. So the doctors really do have to keep an eye on you while you're on it. Increased risk for like heart disease and all that stuff. But the difference, I think, primarily between going through the different types of puberty is, like, when you're on testosterone, you can't stop eating or jerking it. Same thing on estrogen, but you can't stop crying while you're doing it. So it's very similar and yet completely different. It was easier though the second time around because I was an adult and I was able to go down the checklist going, okay, there's my voice starting to break, there's this, there's this. I do have to shave every day now. Some guys, heavier guys, they tend to get very hairy very quickly. I have a friend who has full beard now. I'm still kind of patchy. It kind of depends on the individual, just like normal guys. But I do have to take my testosterone injection form. I have to give myself the injection twice monthly into the muscle, which usually the thighs, the butt. I've heard of some guys doing it in the bicep, but you're really not supposed to. You're supposed to do it more like a meaty area. And I am deathly afraid of needles, by the way. I don't mind tattoo needles, but injections I just can't stand. But I had to just get over that in order to have the testosterone. And yeah.
Did it feel different?
Feel different,
I don't know, as a person?
As a person, I think so, because I've always had severe anxiety. My anxiety definitely decreased on testosterone. Things before where I would freak out over, I'm just like, they're fine. But I really would say there is not like a radical personality shift, but and yet kind of, because I'd spent so long in this costume body, costume metaphorically body, I had kind of developed a character. And when people would say, oh, that's, ladies don't do that, ladies don't act like that. So you then start, behaving in a way that society expects you to behave, if only to just be left alone. And so when I came out, I would have responses, and I'm like, wait, no, I don't actually think that. I just said I think, but that's something that I would have said. Let me think about what I actually feel, and then I'd have to actually, I spent so long playing a character that I had to find myself as a new person. And it was very much like removing a mask, and suddenly, it's been so long that I forgot who I was behind that mask.
Did people treat you differently?
Oh, male privilege is a real thing, by the way. Oh my God. So, I can't even express to you how the difference of night and day. People will treat men with so much more automatic respect than they will women. And, you know, I'm very lucky in that the vast majority of violence against trans people happens to trans women of color. They are the ones who take the brunt of the violence, whereas you know, I can get away with a lot more. Granted, especially if I'm in, like, Atlanta isn't bad for the LGBT community. If I'm in Alabama visiting my parents, I don't go anywhere without a knife, because it's bad. It's very bad. But I was gonna go somewhere with that. I was trying to think.
Have you been hassled?
I have been, not for being trans. Someone mistook me for just like a normal gay guy in Alabama and started to harass me. And, you know, I started kind of reaching back, and then the cashier came over and like, excuse me, that register is open. And they're like, right, and they kind of wandered away, and I was like, oh, but yeah, so I've not really faced any sort of discrimination, no, in Atlanta. People are much more accepting in urban areas. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, the trans community has an enormously high rate of suicide. It's about 40% of trans people attempt suicide, and those are just the ones that we know were trans, not the ones who, you know, felt something was wrong and couldn't put their finger on it, or those who just kept it secret. And it's because it eats you alive. You know, just this knowledge of something is horribly wrong with me, and coming out is such a risk, because you're risking everything. You're risking your family, your friends, your career. If you have a career, your life, because there's such violence against us. And before coming out, I really wrestled with it, of whether I'm going to do it, because I knew my father would be, you know, even if he didn't understand it, I knew he would still be there for me. But before I came out, I was fully prepared to walk away from everything. All of my friends, except for those few who already knew and supported me, all of my extended relatives, to this day, all of my extended relatives won't talk to me. And I have a very, very large extended family. I'm one of 57 cousins on my mother's side. Yeah, it's Catholics, they don't, yeah. No birth control. So, I mean, I was fully prepared to just, I had people in Atlanta already here who were ready to welcome me, so I was fully prepared to just, you know, up and leave, because, you know, there comes a time when the pain of staying safe in a miserable situation is too great, and you're just going to have to take the plunge, you know, one way or the other. And I think that a lot of people, that they just can't risk it, and so they end up falling into despair. And, you know, I've known a lot of trans people who have not had such a good time as I have, with people who support me, and they really struggle because they don't really have a support network beyond the trans community that most of them, you know, they might not know in real life. They might just be online. And it's, let's see, what was the other, oh yeah, that's like 40% compared to, what is it, 4.5 something percent of the rest of the population. It's enormously, and you know, people ask me if young children should be allowed to say, you know, I am trans. They're like, well, yeah, it might be just a phase, but kids these days are, you know, committing suicide at 10, 11 years old. You say they're too young to know they're trans. Well, they're not too young to kill themselves. If you support them, you risk, you know, them maybe making medical decisions that then need to be corrected. But if you don't support them, you might be risking their life. So I feel like not supporting them is simply not an option, because the risk is too great. I'm open to questions, by the way. You cannot weird me out. Oh wait, I was gonna say, actually, I do have a boyfriend. I consider myself a gay man because I am a man, and I prefer male partners. I've had a very wonderful, wild, hippie youth, and tried everything there is to try, and I really do prefer male partners. Now, some people say, well, does that really make you a gay man? And it's like, well, look, I am a man, regardless of my body. I do believe my soul is happiest in a male body and presenting as male, and I am attracted to men. Now, you can stick any label you want to on that, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm a man, I have male partners. You know, call it what you want, but it doesn't change who I am. But yes, I have questions.
So how did you have that conversation?
With my boyfriend, or?
Yeah, like how?
Oh yeah, so my boyfriend is, bless his heart, a very, 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 very gay man. He didn't actually see a pair of breasts in real life until he was hanging out with me and my hippie friends, and as happens at hippie parties, the shirts come off at some point. And he just kind of turned to me and he was just like, that boobs. Yeah. It was, yes, sorry. So that is a huge question in the trans community of, you know, trying to date, and then because there's so much violence against us, at what point do you tell them? And for me, I wrestled with that and for a long time, and I decided, all right, my profile online is not going to say anything about it. I'm going to have a telephone conversation, and after the telephone conversation, the first one, then I will send a text and say, by the way, I am transgendered, here's where I am and thing. I completely understand if that's a deal breaker. If you say no, then I'll never contact you again, it's fine. I understand. And he was actually very understanding, very wonderful with it. He just said, you know what, I wasn't expecting that, but I do believe that trans people are the gender they say they are, so I would be a huge hypocrite if I judged you for that. So I like you as a person so far, so I'm still willing to pursue this. And we've been together for 2 years now, so even though he had never had any experience with someone in a female body, he really rose to the plate on that one. So it is possible.
Did you have
Sorry?
Did you have the whole surgery?
No, he said he had to have
No, I haven't had bottom surgery.
So my question to that, because of your relationship, have y'all ever thought about a family?
Okay, so
How does that conversation?
Yeah, he doesn't really. I mean, he kind of like toys with the idea of maybe someday he wants. Me personally, I despise children.
Okay.
One walks in the room and I'm like, oh God. I think all children should be leashed and muzzled until they're 10 years old. The younger they are, the less I like them. So I will never have children. My brother actually just spawned recently. He had my niece is 6 months old. I've been to visit her once. They tried to make me hold her. I kind of held, and then so now I'm not. I held her once. I'm not obligated to see her again until her wedding. So we're yeah.
Okay. When you have bottom surgery,
Yes.
do you get to choose a size?
Yes, actually you do. But the thing is,
I'm like, oh.
no, so it depends. It depends, because there are different types of bottom surgery. Now, this might be a little TMI if closer. So, when you're on testosterone, or actually, back up a little bit. When a child is forming in the womb, all children start out exactly the same. Now, if the child is a boy, what began as a clitoris grows into a penis, whereas a girl, it stays the same. So basically, a clitoris is an unformed penis. When you're on testosterone, the clitoris starts to grow. Now, it depends on the person as far as the size. Generally, it doesn't get much bigger than your pinky finger. Some people, maybe it's just like the first 2 digits. So some surgery, if you're not really going to be using it in the traditional sense, they just kind of they take the labia majora, fuse it together, put some silicone implants in there, and there you go, you have a scrotum. And then they just kind of raise up the clitoris so it's not quite hanging down so much. So then you basically have a you have fully sensate penis, you just not really big. Now if you want to have like the full package, as it were, not to use the pun, then that takes some really kind of Frankensteinian surgery, where they take surgery from either your lower abdomen or your arm or your leg, and they craft a penis, and it's hugely complicated and it's very expensive. Lately, they've gotten much better at it, so eventually, over time, some sensation returns to it. But if you're doing that, depending on how much skin you have available to donate, some guys end up pretty damn big for what it is. And then, of course, nowadays, they're actually, because they're really well done, some guys get like veins tattooed on them, and like it's starting to get pretty sophisticated, and yet also kind of horrifying, the idea of, hey, I'm going to go and get my dick tattooed. You're like, ugh. But what's really funny is when they take it like from the arm or leg and you already have a tattoo, like I have a lot of tattoos, so then you come with a pre-tattooed dick. So then, you get bragging rights of, oh yeah, I sat there through it, it was fine. Like actually because I had my chest surgery done, I have no sensation in my nipples at all. So once it healed, I went and had them pierced. And my piercer was like so impressed with me. He's like, wow, you didn't even flinch. And I'm like, yeah. And probably looked at my scars and he's like, you can't even feel this, can you? Yeah. So some people lose sensation in their nipple, some don't. Again, it depends on the person. Yes?
Please tell me if this is too personal.
No,
but
there's nothing too personal.
Being that you still have a vagina, like, do you and your boyfriend engage in vaginal intercourse, or is it just like strictly anal?
So it depends on, personally, I'm more pragmatic than a lot of trans guys. A lot of trans guys will not touch their vagina. They absolutely will not think about it. I'm more realistic about it. I'm like, look, it's there. It's easier. Whatever. So personally, yes, we do engage in vaginal sex. That was a learning curve for my boyfriend. Bless his heart. But yeah, again, it depends on the individual. Some are more flexible than others. Yes, either.
Do you think it's going to affect your relationship after you get body surgery?
With this particular boyfriend, no. Thing is, I'm a very non-romantic person. I mean, if this relationship doesn't work out, I'm not going to try again, because I'm so comfortable on my own. And even looking at my friends who've been married, I have a pair of friends who've been married for 15 years because they got married right out of high school, and they're very happy together. But it's just I'm okay on my own, and relationships take so much effort, and God damn it, I just want to play on Facebook. Leave me the fuck alone. So when I was considering coming out, that was a huge factor for me of, will anybody even love me? Will I ever be able to find a partner if I'm, what so much of society considers a freak? And that was really one of the options weighing heavily on my mind. And finally I decided, you know what, come hell or high water, I can't live like this. If I have to continue looking at myself in the mirror and seeing somebody else, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to put a bullet in my brain. So I decided finally that was a risk I was willing to take. But yes, you had a question?
No, yeah, that was my question.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I know you said your parents were really religious, but were you religious as well? Like, was that a conflict of interest for you, or were you just
For me, it wasn't a conflict of because my mother was deeply, deeply Catholic. My father is Methodist, so he's not as bad. I am I mix Buddhism and paganism thing. So for me, it wasn't an issue at all. To let you know what kind of family I have. So my mother sat myself and my brother down at the table when I was 12 years old and told us that if we were gay, she would not support us and not come to our weddings. I remember once when I was younger, I was walking with my aunt into the store and there were some Girl Scouts selling cookies and I asked if I could get some and she said no because the lesbians are taking over the Girl Scout Association. Yeah. So that is the sort of family, the sort of devout family that I had, and I wasn't allowed to watch Pocahontas or Hercules growing up because my mother thought I would become a pagan. Yeah, spoiler alert, didn't want anyway. But yeah, so it really was a conflict for my family, not for me personally. Then my dad's side of the family are very much the very sweet Southern people who, well, we'll always love you as long as you have Jesus in your heart. Like, okay, sure, we'll go with that. Yeah, my mother's side will not talk to me. My younger cousins will. My cousins around my age. So that coming out to the family, by the way, was because there's so many of them. I was like, by the time I called like 3 of them, the rest of the family would know because, yeah. So I just kind of, when I came out to the wider world, I made this very long Facebook post explaining it and all that. And because it's Facebook, my generation got to it first. So they all expressed their support. No, we'll, go you, come out of that closet. And, so then the older generation who don't check Facebook as often found out later and saw that all of their children were supportive. So then they had no choice but to be, publicly supportive of, oh well, we'll love you anyway and stuff, and then never heard from them again. I only had one person who opposed it publicly. It was one of my aunts who is kind of the crazy one anyway. And she had, we had a very long kind of back and forth on private message for a while. And her stance on it, when I really was trying to drive home to her, is I am not happy living as I am. I cannot continue doing this, and I'm going to change. And that's all there is to it. And finally her argument boiled down to happiness has nothing to do with it. The point of living is to serve God. And, be miserable if you have to be miserable. So finally I just blocked her, and I was like, I'm not talking to you again because you are a toxic person. And I don't believe in the Christian God, but if he does exist, I do believe that he would not want me to live in misery and my life at 20-something years old. Questions? Yes.
You talked about your therapist saying you had to live as your wanted gender for a year.
That is legal. That is legally required, yes.
So what were like the main changes that happened in that year? Like what did you do differently
for
to
me?
prove it, I guess?
You have to, it's very loosely defined. Like it's in the medical sort of like requirements for treating trans people that you have to go through. So it is very loosely. But in my case, I dressed in men's clothing. I introduced myself with my intended name. My friends who were very supportive about it were very, using my proper gender, proper pronouns. Basically, you just go through life trying to be as much that gender as you possibly can get away with. Of course, my boss at the time was the mother of one of my very old friends, so she was right on board with it, and so like I said, I was very lucky in that case.
With your friend group, how was it with them adjusting to it, calling you he and...
It was, my friend group, so like at the time I was in college, so they were much easier than my high school friends who, this very southern conservative community, they're a bit harder. But my younger friends, my college friends, they were very on board with it. There were some mess ups. Even I mess up from time to time. And but no, we kind of gathered through it. I remember one time the best story was one of my friends was talking and he said referenced me as Christina, and then one of the other friends brought it in and said, "No, Christina's dead to us. It's Tristan now." So no, they were very, very supportive, and it was actually easier than you would think. Yeah.
you use the men's restroom, correct?
Yes.
How, like, was that?
It was actually super easy, you know what, as long as, I find, you know, like at first I was kind of like, am I going to get away with this? Then I realized, you know what, being in society is all about attitude. If you walk around like you own the place, people will assume you're supposed to be there. The only time I ever had an issue with it, actually a couple times, going in, I was in the men's restroom, I walked in, and this one guy turned to me and went, and just yelled, like, does the men's restroom mean nothing to you? And I just kind of turned around and made my voice go as deep as I possibly could, and I was like, I am a guy thing, and he was kind of just like, and then he turned and bolted out of the room. It was pretty funny. I do occasionally, if I'm going to the men's restroom, have somebody, you know, look at me and go, men's, and I turn around and go, yeah. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, go away. So, you know, there is some kind of issues on occasion, but as long as you just kind of roll with it, if I actually felt in danger from these people, then I you know, like I said, I usually have something on me that I can get, or, you know, at last case scenario, I can always just run.
Right.
So when you go to the restroom, in the men's restroom, in all in the restroom, I mean, some restrooms have urinals.
Right.
And some of them, and do they have stalls?
Yes, all men's restrooms have stalls as well, and so I always use the stall. You have a question?
Oh, okay, this is my question. I know in society, basically, men are somewhat safer. Like, do you feel more safe?
Oh, yes.
Like, when you walk down the street, like,
Oh,
I know,
yes.
like, I check my shoulder, like, 20 times. Like, you can just kind of walk and feel.
I remember very clearly. I was always that girl who always, you know, had to look around. If I walk in the room, I have to know where the exit is. Even if you're not doing it consciously, you just, you know, like, you know, guys walking on the street while you try to get, like, you know, kind of on the other side, just because, you know, it's a safety tactic. Now I do that. I still do it to a slight degree, but now it's much less because I don't have to worry about it as much. Like, I'm not as scared to walk somewhere at night. Like when Pokemon Go came out, now I can just, you know, wander wherever I want. As, you know, if I was still presenting as a woman, I would not be able to do that safely. And you know, it really is a huge difference. And, you know, my boyfriend, he like sometimes he'll just not be paying attention. He'll walk. Like, if we're especially walking behind a woman, like even in parking lot, I'm like, you know, give her some space. You know, because she doesn't know who you are. She doesn't know if you're coming up behind her. And he's like, well, you know, I'm not, though. And he's like, I try to explain, that's not the point. The point is she's even if she doesn't know who you are, she's afraid of you. So I always, whenever I walk around, if I'm near women, I always try to give them, you know, more space. You know, if we're coming up to the door at the same time, I stand back and let them go first. And, it's just a matter of, I guess, empathy at this point, of knowing just how afraid women are of every man they meet, no matter who they are. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have any, I guess, role models who you like most, model your like sense of masculinity around?
So, actually, yes, my very first love and idol and everything else was the Green Power Ranger, Tommy Oliver. Yeah. You remember him with the 90s ponytail? He was like kind of androgynous with his like very high cheekbones, his long hair, but he's still obviously masculine and just like, oh God, that man. Still love that man. But yeah, so that was kind of what I started kind of going for with the kind of, like, I'm never going to be like this huge butch guy. I'm always going to be androgynous, no matter what I do with myself. Even, you know, there are guys who, you know, really start doing bodybuilding and they really bulk up. They still look androgynous. There's little, you know, I got some hips. There's not really much I can do about it. So, yeah, you just kind of, that's who I kind of idolize. Anyone else? No?
Did you have to change your manners? Because, you know, Southern manners are so
Yes,
different.
yes. So one thing my mother drilled in my head as a kid was cross your legs. Yeah, always cross your legs. And of course, as a kid, I'm always just like, whatever, I don't care. So then that was kind of a habit I had to break myself of not crossing my legs. I still have to do this, though, because it's so ingrained in me. Some things like, that you don't even consider, like, that women do that they don't even consider feminine. They consider just polite manners. Like, sometimes when I'd laugh, I would cover my mouth, because, like, you know, you don't want to have, like, show, you know, a open mouth. And it's just considered like, oh, that's ladylike behavior. And now, and my friends actually point out, you know, you cover your mouth a lot when you laugh. I'm like, oh, I guess I do. Yeah, it's just things you don't even really notice, but are still kind of, even just kind of subconsciously considered feminine. So that was one thing. But you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question about when you took hormones.
Mm-hmm.
When you started taking them, did you notice like a difference in like your sex drive?
Oh,
Like
yes.
as far as like the testosterone?
Oh yes,
Like, it's just...
it is very much. Like, of course, one odd thing about, in my case, was I never had an orgasm on estrogen, ever, even though I was sexually active. And it wasn't until I started testosterone, I guess maybe I was more comfortable with my body, or I don't know what, but yeah, there was a much higher increase in sex drive. Of course, I don't know whether it was the testosterone specifically, or the fact that I was suddenly getting, you know, a rush of hormones every, you know, 2 weeks, or, you know, whatever, but yeah, there was a big difference. Anyone else? Yes?
How did you choose your name?
My name, okay, so Tristan was there from the very beginning in my mind. I don't really know where it came from, but it just was. And of course then I did some more research into it, being an anthropologist, and I found out that Tristan is a Welsh name. It is so ancient its meaning has been lost to history, but Trist is French for sad, so that meaning is often given instead. So the name Tristan is kind of like an unknown, hidden by a mask of sadness. And I thought that's very poetic, because it's like I'm removing my sad mask, and I don't know what's underneath. And so I thought, well, you know, that clearly this is just meant to be. My old middle name, by the way, never go up to a trans person, or even if you know them, don't ask them what their old name was, because they consider that to be rude. It's like an old identity. They don't want to be associated with that anymore. But I don't mind. My middle name was Elizabeth, so I wanted something, you know, still kind of long, traditional kind of thing. And I really admire Alexander the Great. He was one of the figures I researched in my undergrad years, and so I chose Alexander. There was a very long period where I was considering all sorts of different middle names, but eventually that was the one that settled. Anyone?
Sorry, we just went through a class change. That's why I can go going in and out. I think I have other questions. What do I want to ask? Did you have a point at which you crossed over and felt comfortable in your body?
It was very much a gradual change. Like, the more that I changed to be more masculine, the more comfortable I was. So these days when I look at myself and look at my body, it's not even half as bad as it was when I first started. I do have these gigantic scars here under my chest from my surgery, but I'm now getting them tattooed over like a full chest piece, and the more that they're covered, the less I see them, the better I feel. And then also with my shoulders have broadened, and muscle has changed, and just so the less, like, even these feminine characteristics that you don't even really think about, like you can see, just even when a girl has a very, you know, boyish figure, you can still see that it's feminine if you compared it side by side, and it's these things that the subtle features that slowly change that it might. Yeah, I do feel much more comfortable with my body, but yeah, it was a very, very gradual process. Yes?
But I mean, when you have like a reduction, I know that sometimes when you have like a reduction, it takes a lot of time to heal.
Yes.
Did it take you like
It didn't take as much time as I might have thought it would. It did take some time. The bottom surgery would take a great deal more time, because not only are you getting the surgery itself, but I have to get the hysterectomy, the vaginectomy, everything. That's gonna be a very long, complicated process. Yes. Go ahead.
I mean, not to make you feel uncomfortable, but the other question that I have is like, you know, when they do like they want to create like a penis, for example, how do they do like to make like the urine go normally? Because I know that the way the process for Transman and Transwoman is totally different, because Transman is like they cut the penis and then they put it, but for women it's more complicated than it is for men.
It depends on what kind of surgery you're getting, but when trans men do get surgery, they almost always get the urethra lengthened through the new penis.
Yeah.
So then that of course takes, you have to use a catheter for quite a while after that, and so yeah, it is a immensely complicated process with lot of different variables, and there's just no real way to sum it up because it's so many different options. Yes.
Do you plan on getting the bottom surgery?
Yes, I do plan. I would get it today if I possibly could. It's so expensive.
Do you know which version you want?
You know, I used to think I wanted the more basic thing because I don't plan on using my penis sexually, but you know, I do want to travel a lot, and there are some cases, especially if you go to some hot springs, depending on the country, they don't allow clothing in, and so I don't want to have to deal with having to explain myself. So I think I would go for the more complicated sort of pack, a full penis, but as simple as I could make it. So, yes. Question?
Yeah, have you had or do you want to have any facial masculinization?
Yes, I definitely want to have, because I have a very feminine looking face, I do want to have at least a nose job. I'm hoping that's going to happen maybe in the next year, depending on finances. So yeah, but yes, that is, actually, speaking to a lot of trans people, a lot of trans people would want the facial surgery more than they want the body surgery, because it's about just, the day-to-day conversations, because women and men really are treated radically differently in society. And so yes, that would be what I'm going for. I'll be with you a second.
So, I know you said you have to go to a doctor for them to prescribe like testosterone and things of that sort. Do your doctor give you a reference to who do your sex change, or you have to do your own research?
Typically you do your own research. They do have, usually the doctors will have like a repertoire of some people that they can recommend, but the trans network is actually, the internet community is actually really well informed, because most of them didn't have, before the internet, we really didn't have any information. So there's a lot of websites where you can go on and say, okay, here's the list of doctors that will, therapists, here's the doctors that will treat hormones, here's the doctors that will do surgery, and here's, and so we really do try to organize ourselves as best we can.
Yeah.
Yes?
It's possible to give you like
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
It's possible to give you like a point of view, because you say that you wanted to do like a surgery, but I find you like really attractive the way you are. Right?
Oh, well, thank you.
So I don't see the point for you. I think it's going to be like, I'd rather have you spend the money on like doing like the other surgery that you wanted to do than doing the facial, because I think you look like.
Oh, thank you. Like, I do get like some people are like, oh yeah, you don't need masculinization. You look quite thing, but it is the body, the dysphoria, of looking in the mirror and seeing something not right. It's like, like anorexic women, they see fat where there isn't any fat. So when I look at myself in the mirror, I see very, very feminine features, even if they're actually not. So for my own personal comfort, I would probably have that done. Yes.
You said you had like a pretty big support network when you first coming to Atlanta and finding community. I guess what support networks or community activists or resources do you feel like help you